Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
Hey, my name's Adam from Toronto, Ontario. And I subscribe to the Creative Control Patreon because I feel that at the end of the day, there are very few people in the industry who are able to consistently get the kind of quality interviews out of very diverse subjects of many creative stripes and disciplines, as Vish does pretty well on every episode of the podcast. It's a no-brainer to me that I want to support this when you factor that in to all of the bonus content you get on Patreon. And, you know, it's a listener-supported podcast, so I want to keep the great content coming. So that's why you should also support Creative Control on Patreon.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today.
Please go crazy for Arthur Simeon!
Creative Control with Vish Khanna.
Arthur Simeon is a brilliant comedian currently based in Toronto, Ontario. Originally from Uganda, Simeon is one of Canada's hardest-working and distinctive stand-up comics, and he has written for numerous comedy shows in this country. In 2020, Comedy Records released his highly entertaining live album, The Blackest Panther, and Arthur and I recently connected to discuss what life has been like for him in Toronto during the COVID-19 pandemic, social media, reality and consequence culture, outspoken comedians, racism and white supremacy, dehumanization and handshakes, The Blackest Panther, future plans, and much more. A part of the Entertainment One Network with the support of listeners like you who follow and subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, and Massey Hall's concert film series live at masseyhall.com, where you can stream dozens of 30-minute films for free, including performances by past podcast guests like Shad, plus in-kind support from Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton. This is the 596th episode of Creative Control, featuring the lovely and talented and very funny Arthur Simeon, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hi, Arthur. How's it going?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's nice to have you on the show. As you may know, I'm a longtime fan. I don't know if do you ever ponder like Vish over there? He loves me. I feel if anyone loves me, it's that Vish guy. Have you ever felt that?
I can't say that I have, but I should pay more attention, I guess.
Well, I only allude to the fact that I've written about your work in the past and said nice things about your latest record, that kind of
and
stuff.
I fully appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not fishing for compliments from me, sir. I just want to establish that I'm a fan. It's nice to finally get to chat. I want to ask you, where in the world are you, first of all? That's how I usually begin.
I'm in Toronto right now. It's a sunny day. I'm looking outside right now. The sun is out, but it's also obviously very cold.
Why do you say obviously? Because we're Canadians. We know what it's like at this time of year. Is that
because
what you mean?
It's Canada. I should actually, you know what? I should have asked where you are before I said that Toronto was cold. Because of all of Canada, I'm guessing it's the warmest part of the country right now.
Well, you may not know this, but I used to live in Guelph, Ontario, and last January, my family and I moved to Edmonton, Alberta, which some have described as one of the coldest places in the entire world. So
Yeah, in that case, it's a sunny day out here and it's tropical.
it's not so bad here as I'm speaking to you. We're supposed to have a big deep freeze. You know, when I moved here, within the first 2 weeks, this was just before the lockdown happened, and I didn't have to deal with any bad weather because I've been in my home since March. But when we first got here, they had record-breaking cold, like just 2 weeks of minus 40 that no one had ever experienced. That's how I landed.
And is that when you regretted your decision, or did that come later?
I think that came later. Yeah, that's happening. Okay. That's happening now as our province, is leading the way in terms of pandemic calamities. Yes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. How has your, we're into 2021 now, but obviously 2020 was unusual to say the least. How is your pandemic time personally? How did it go? How is it going?
I mean, I think with like everyone else, it's ebbed and flowed kind of thing. I mean, it's mostly been in the dumps. Obviously, being a live performer as a chosen profession, I've been out of work for almost a year now. So it's been a bit difficult to adjust to because you're sort of used to being on different stages on any given night and then just having nowhere to go. So yeah, it's definitely been up and down, with mostly downs of just sort of not being able to obviously socialize with friends, go do work. But I've been lucky enough that I still managed to get a bit of work from home projects, like writing projects and stuff. So I was able to keep busy in some respects. But obviously, it's a lot of introspection, a lot of like, what's the world coming to? I think that's been my pandemic.
Yeah, the introspection part is something that I'm definitely curious about, and I will ask you about that in a moment. But just to talk a little bit of shop, when you say you've had writing work that you can do from home, what kinds of I know you as a live performer. I've seen you perform live. I've heard you perform live, obviously. The Blackest Panther, your album from, was it last year or was it the year before? It feels like it was last year.
Well, it came out, I think was pretty much the last public thing that I did was the release of that album. It came out at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah. So brilliant album. Like, I know you as a stand-up, I guess, primarily. What kinds of writing, you don't have, if you don't feel comfortable citing specifics, that's fine. But what kind of writing work have you been able to do from home? I'm just curious.
Well, a lot of different things. I did a couple of episodes of The Debaters for CBC Radio. I was a creative consultant on a new CBC television sitcom called Humor Resources with John Doerr. So I happened to do some work while being quarantined.
Okay, that's good. But I mean, you also alluded to the fact that you miss being on stage. You miss social interactions. Are there any people you're happy that you avoid? Like you can avoid, you don't have to deal with them because of the pandemic?
I don't think I do, because I mean I really enjoyed every part of my job, and it's not just the being on stage part. I really enjoy the interactions with people that come up to you, and even the people who say the strangest, sort of weirdest things. Are always fun to talk to, because it really is. I think one of the beautiful things about stand-up is that you talk to a room full of strangers who, on any given night come from so many different backgrounds. And so their response to your work is going to be very different, right? Like, even if they don't relate to you and they don't, some people will tell you they don't like you, but even in the way they don't like you, it's very interesting.
Right.
Because someone will say something like, I didn't like you because you basically spoke too much truth to me. Or I didn't like you because I don't understand what you're talking about. Or I didn't like you because of what you were wearing. Like, it's such a spectrum of opinion that I enjoy it, because that's what makes my job fun, because then I can either make fun of it or learn from it and try and make, my work more relevant.
How does that real life interaction that you've had with audience members, fellow comedians, people in the world, how does that compare to, say, social media or online? Interactions online have a far different tone, or they used to have a far different tone than they did in real life. People are getting more brazen online, I think.
Yes.
And it's sort of having a They kind of feed into each other. People feel more brazen online, then they feel more brazen in real life. They say things to your face that they used to only feel like comfortable saying in anonymity online. So I'm curious about that. What now that we've mostly all switched to virtual life, have you noticed anything shifting in human behavior and the way people interact, maybe with you or others?
I don't think there's been a shift. I think the human behavior has always been the same, but you're right in terms of it's been amplified by social media. I think in a different world, we wouldn't have access to a lot of people's most inner thoughts, but human beings in general are mostly insecure. Like it's just a species of insecure beings sort of walking around. And so I think the big difference with moving to virtual is that everyone now is safe in knowing that there'll be no repercussions for their vitriol, I think.
No
'Cause
repercussions. You
in
don't think there are no repercussions? Is that really, you think that? I feel like the other side of the aisle, if you will, might say, "Oh, cancel culture. You know, you can't say anything, you can't do anything." But you
No,
think
you can do whatever you want. I think cancel culture is a bit of a I personally don't think it's a thing. I know what people mean by cancel culture in terms of like people losing their jobs and stuff like that. But I think, especially, and I'm going to stick to comedians, like the idea that you can't say anything is not true because you've always been able to say whatever you want, but you also have to deal with the consequences, whether those consequences are real or not, right? Like the idea of I can't say something is ridiculous because everyone has been able to say what they need to say. And lots of people, you know, like our neighbors, the South, just had a head of state who pretty much said whatever he wanted to say and got voted into one of the most powerful offices in the world. So it's like, you can't convince me that somehow hateful speech is something that's banned by society. A lot of people don't agree with it, and therefore maybe your business will suffer, but those are the consequences of you having an opinion that not a lot of people agree with.
what about the flip side of that example you're using? This same individual was not only voted out, but now, as we're speaking, is facing potential censure. He's actually facing some potential consequences with impeachment. There are like 75 lawsuits that await him. Like
Right.
Pariah. So he did say whatever he wanted for 4 years, and he said it for his whole life before that. And it was just, oh, that's just a farce. We don't have to take that seriously. He was a pioneer in trolling, frankly. I mean, I think.
Yes.
Then so he came to power in the perfect age for that kind of mindset of trolling people. But now, it already don't you feel tonally, again, we're Canadians, you and we're Canadians, but
Yeah.
don't you feel a little tonal I was saying to someone today, like, I actually don't normally buy into politicians or politics having real efficacy or, you know, can impact our daily lives, but I feel a tonal shift. I feel like as we're speaking, whatever happens, we will see what happens, but like, the Biden administration seems already to be trying to kick some ass and do some things.
Yes, I think tonally as a government they will, but I think we have to separate the whole from the individual. And I think part of it, like you're right, there is repercussions to the trolling that, or what you call the trolling. But I think, and this is sort of something I haven't quite found a way to sort of distill it down, but I don't think people care more now than they did then. I think they're just more aware of the consequences of such speech. You know, one of the things that I talked about in 2015 and 2016 was that I enjoyed the rise of Trump because for the longest time, a lot of the stuff that came to light was being denied by people who were too scared to face the truth.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
So and this is why I say, like, I think all those conversations about bigotry and about misogyny that were happening, especially the bigotry ones, because I'm lucky enough to travel, you know, to different parts of Canada, for example, and and from the rural to the urban areas, different cities, and I have been on the receiving end of a lot of just gross, hateful speech.
Yeah.
And when I would talk about it with some of my friends, everyone would always try and play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Like I was unlucky to run into the one person who feels that way. I was unlucky.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it happened to be a Monday, and Mondays in Edmonton happened to be the day when all the white supremacists come out.
Right.
And you know, it's that gas station, like everyone knows that gas station, like you shouldn't have stopped it. You should have stopped at the one across the street because the one, you know, like there was always an excuse that it's just that one person, and I happen to, you know, to pick them out.
Yeah.
On several different occasions in several different parts of the country. And then it became very clear that this is not just, and you talked about him being voted out, but he was voted out by a historic majority.
Yes.
Because he also had a historic minority.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
yeah.
So while people are celebrating, for me, what terrifies me is the fact that, you know, people are like, you know, Biden, you know, had like 81 million of the popular vote. And then it's like, yeah, but this guy had like 70 million of the popular vote.
Well, like when I used to
that for me is more terrifying
Yeah.
than the joy of the 81.
Sure. When I used to take the subway in Toronto, every once in a while it would occur to me, like, people on this subway car, a crowded subway car, some of these people voted for Rob Ford. Some of these people voted for Doug Ford. Like, it is wrong, I would think. You're I think where you're coming from, and I agree. Like, you can't blame the leader that was elected into office for being, you know, some sort of rogue, you know, anomaly. People voted for him. As you say, masses of people vote for these figures that we all, some of us anyway, really dislike. And it's, for some reason, it takes the frustrating thing for me, and I don't know if you feel this way, is like what a lot of people are saying now is like, guys, we all saw this coming. We all said this stuff in 2015, like, you know, about, in this case, about Trump. A lot of us could see what was going to happen. We didn't anticipate it being, you know, that 500,000 Americans would die, you know, people around the world would die. I think, you know, no one could have predicted that, but at the same time, we said it was going to be bad. So that's the frustration. Like, some of this writing is clearly on the wall, but some people...
And was even way before that.
Yes.
You know, and that's the thing. It's like, I think one of the things that it said, for me, the joy was that you couldn't sit on the fence anymore. And unfortunately, the way the world works, especially in North America, is that there's a group of people who can't afford to sit on the fence. And those are the people who are marginalized for whatever reason, whether it be indigenous voices, black voices, brown voices, whatever it is. Like, you can't afford to sit on the fence.
Right.
Like, no one will let you sit on the fence. I always tell people, like, even on the days where you feel like, okay, today's going to be a good day, I can just walk to the grocery store and walk back to my home. And in that moment, there'll be something that will happen that will let me know that I'm different from everyone else.
Yes.
So as a black man living in North America, I can't afford to sit on the fence. But for a lot of white people especially, they can afford to sit on the fence because a lot of the stuff that affects people doesn't affect them on a day-to-day basis. So for the longest time, they could afford to sit on the fence. They could afford to sort of play devil's advocate. And I over the last year, I've had all these conversations of people sort of with, you know, the chickens coming home to roost, is a lot of people getting into my emails and getting on the phone and being like, you know what, I'm sorry that we didn't have this conversation in a more serious form 5 years ago. Yeah. And I'm like, I good for you that you're getting to this point, but you have to understand, like, for a lot of people, you can't afford to sit on the fence.
Well, microaggressions are they're called microaggressions because they're subtle. Like, I remember at the onset of the pandemic, I would go to the Edmonton grocery stores with my mask on, and not everyone was wearing masks at this point. And I remember initially thinking that people were staring at me because I was wearing a mask. But then I started to look more closely at their eyes and think, wait a minute, this is a familiar look. Oh, right, I'm a brown person wearing a mask. Like, I forgot. Right. Sometimes I have a thing, I've talked about it many times, but I forget I'm different until someone else points it out. And you know what I mean? Like, do you have that? Do you like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm aware of it, obviously. I'm not blind, but I just don't think of my difference unless it's pointed out to me via a look. Sometimes, often it's via
Well,
an ignorant comment.
being an did you grow up in Canada?
I did. I was born here. Yeah. You grew up in
Okay,
you were born in Uganda, right?
I was born in Uganda. So for me as an immigrant, I had to learn that. I had to learn the look
Yeah.
because, and I've spoken about this before, maybe not so much publicly, but like I learned about racism moving to Canada because
Yeah.
I thought that people would consider me different because I'm an immigrant, because of my nationality, because of my accent. And I only realized much, much later into my immigration or into my moving here that there are people who will look at you as different even before they know your background.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And that made me sad because I know there's plenty of Black people that are born and raised in Canada, generations deep. And I felt bad for them because for me, it was always like someone treated me differently when I was speaking to them. I didn't it didn't bother me because I'm like, yeah, I'm visiting, I'm from somewhere else. And I assume that this is how you would sort of react to someone who's from a different part of the world.
Right.
And maybe someone you don't, particularly understand, because I think my accent has evolved over time, but I'm assuming at that point when I first arrived that it was a lot thicker. It was a lot of, like you're just a different person. And so learning about the idea that just a skin color can define your relationship with a stranger was something very sort of jarring. And I learned, so the look that you talk about, I had to learn about that. And then the problem is once you learn about it, you can't unlearn it.
Were you basing this distinction on any memories or experiences you had when you lived in Uganda and encountered people who were visiting or maybe didn't look?
No, it's basically like not so much of visiting, but like I grew up in the city in Kampala again, and like if say a white person stopped you on the street to ask for directions, you treated them differently than you would a fellow Ugandan.
You would, yeah.
Right?
Right.
You would, and as this is not like a negative or a positive, you just basically, you'd give them way more information than you would, like you'd be like, what do you need to get to the
like sure.
There would be a bit of difference because you're like, oh, this person is visiting, and depending on who you are, you want to give them either the best experience or the worst experience, depending on how you feel about them.
Right.
But you would definitely have a difference in your relationship to them.
Yeah, right. There's you're getting at the subtext of what you're talking about is courtesy. Whether you're going to be courteous or not is based on your own personality type, and less to do with them being different or looking different. You understand.
And so when you move as an African, you move here. When someone say again, if I ask for directions and someone is rude to me, I would be offended by the rudeness, but I wouldn't overthink it. In terms of thinking it's a systemic or societal thing, I would think this person is rude because I'm African.
Sorry, there's a bit, I chuckle because there's a bit on your album about this where, if a white person does something wrong, you don't blame all of white society for their ills. But so it conjures
and
that
so,
for me. Yeah.
And then you learn quickly that, this could be a systemic thing.
Yes.
But you learn that later because, again, like it's a learning process. If you're not used to it, you sort of because none of the movies or television shows really talked about this in ways that you could sort of understand. Yeah. Not even the ways that they talk about it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that level. And speaking of sort of interactions and sort of social decorum, I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier about hateful speech and cancel culture and the now, I guess, deposed leader that we were talking about. Because one of the things that has struck me about what was going on over the last 4 years in America is that you had this hateful person who was couching a lot of their hate as comedy, suggesting that what he, like locker room talk, that was a joke. Right. I was clearly being sarcastic. So basically kind of weaponizing comedy. You don't know how to me it was like, I'm a comedian. You can't take a joke when I say, I'm banning Muslims or what. Like, it was very twisted what he did. Do you have a
Right.
perspective on that mindset as a comedian, that this guy, he was a wannabe comedian? Like, those rallies were stand-up sets, ostensibly. People would
Right.
say he was riffing, and I was like, no, he thinks he's a comedian. And to be frank, every once in a while he got in some good lines, I will say.
Right.
But
Right.
was it worth it? So your perspective on that, like, comedy is comedy came under fire. When I think about people who were canceled, if you will, over the past 4 years, Michelle Wolf, like, I mean, some of them, I'm not going to get into the Cosbys and the Louis C.K.'s and whatever
Right.
else, but like, some people were kind of censored and blacklisted for jokes. Meanwhile, this
Right.
guy was taking on, like, to me, his whole persona was, I'm joking. Like, this is trolling and joking and pranking people all the time. What is your take on that? What happened to comedy in the last 4 years? Do you have a take on that?
I personally don't even think he's trying to be a comedian, because I mean, there is a narcissism there that is really very, with which comedians, I guess, are very comfortable with. So I
Sure.
guess
And
that way
insecurity,
we can
yeah.
relate to him.
Yeah.
But I think the people you talk about, the Michelle Wolfs and the Kathy Griffin, I think part of it is because it's easy to come for comedians, because comedians in very many ways have no safety net. You know, there's the great Roy Wood Jr.,
Yes.
very funny comedian,
Yes,
who I'm
he's
sure
very
you're
funny.
familiar with.
Yes, very funny.
Said something really profound that, as you know, as most really good comedians do. He said, comedy is the only art form that is made in front of the consumer.
Yes.
Everything else is sort of done beforehand and, you know, brought to the
Perfected. Yeah, it's produced and
yes, perfected before it's,
yeah.
but comedy is only perfect in front of the consumer. And I feel like because of that, because of the idea that everyone has a window into your process, it's easy to come for comedians, because here's the thing, I don't ever want to give a comedian a pass for telling a horrible joke.
Right.
But for me, I've been in enough comedy clubs, you know, on lineups with 7-8 people. And 3 of those 8 were horrendous comedians, both talent-wise and content-wise.
Right.
Right? And I was offended by their presence in that room, but I would never want them to leave that stage, because I'm like, hey, someone could argue the same for me as well.
Sure.
Maybe they think I'm talentless and my content is horrendous. And so for me, I've never thought of it as we should get rid of this person. I personally want to, but I would never advocate for it on a much larger scale. But people can do it because comedians are an easy target to sort of like chastise. Because one, not just Trump, everyone thinks they can do comedy. Every single person.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is why comedians, we always hear, you know, oh man, if I had done it, I think I should get up. I should, you know, this person at work should get up on stage. My brother is one of the funniest people I know. He should get up on stage. My dad makes me laugh all the time. He should get up on stage. Like, no one truly respects the art form because everyone thinks that they can do it secretly, and not so secretly. They're like, nah, I can do this as well. So when you sort of have a misstep, it's easy for the mob to come for you because they're like, this is an easy thing to do. Why can't you get it right? So when you say like what happened to comedy, I don't think comedy changed. I think audiences have been empowered enough to be like, we can just sort of tune someone out. But for me, I find it very hypocritical because they don't do the same to people who actually affect their lives, like policymakers, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, you know, just give you an example of the Texas senator, Ted Cruz, who said, like, you know, the Paris Agreement means that, you know, Biden cares more about the citizens of Paris than the citizens of Pittsburgh. That's a joke. Like, that's a great joke if it's coming from a comedian. But if it's coming from a politician, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because either you're too stupid to understand what's going on, or you're intentionally misleading people because you know that your followers or your constituents are too dumb to realize what the difference is.
Yeah, and in that
And
in that particular case, Senator Cruz is echoing what the president said at the time that he pulled out of that agreement. So invoking the same city, going after the same followers who will
Right.
remember that soundbite. It's repeating the joke, if you will, retelling the joke.
So if you're a comedian and you tell, because on stage, and I shouldn't say it's a great joke, because if you said it on stage, people would boo you
Well, it's
because it's such a hack
yes,
line, right?
Sure.
And so, but if you said it on stage as a comedian, you would get canceled, so to speak, right? People would like, this person is terrible. That's the worst joke I've ever heard, blah, blah, blah. But when a politician does it, there's no, apart from ridiculing them for not knowing the difference, there's no actual repercussions.
Right.
They get to keep a powerful seat. They get to keep making policy.
Right. Right.
So when people get mad at comedians, for me, it's always a case of like, you're pretending. You feel helpless, and you feel more comfortable attacking the jester than actually looking into the issue behind that joke.
Yeah. When you say that everyone thinks they can be a comedian, I mean, I remember the rapper Buck 65 had a tweet that sticks with me. It was probably 10 years old now, but his tweet was something like, I never thought I'd live to see the day where everyone thought they were a comedian and a photographer, but here we are, talking
Right.
about social media. Like social media at the time when it came on, that's what everyone, but at the same time, I feel like that's happened. Like as you and I are speaking right now, we are at the tail end of this Bernie Sanders mittens meme. And
Right.
what I've noticed with these sorts of trends and memes is that for about a day, I like everyone else is enjoying this meme and whatever is happening.
Of course.
But then what I find is within about 36 hours, I start to see in my feed comedians I respect, kind of making fun of the meme or sort of downplaying the meme. And I find I've had
Right.
conversations with comedians recently who feel very protective of their form. It's sort of in line with what you're describing. Like, good Lord, like, the other one these days is Sarah Cooper. Do you know Sarah Cooper?
Right. I do.
Yeah. So Sarah Cooper, people, comedians in particular, jumped on it. A lot of us were like, this is very funny. Like she's really skewering him, but this lip syncing thing that she does with
Right.
the acting. But comedians were like, good Lord, this person got a Netflix special for this, I know it's competitive. I know there's insecurity, but I see it every time. I wait. We're all enjoying a thing.
Right.
In about 36 hours, comedians are going to jump on it. Do you have a take on that?
Right.
What's going on there? Why does that occur? Is it envy?
I mean,
Is it-
you pretty much nailed it. It's the insecurity. It's
Yeah.
there's a lot of hubris that comes with being a comedian. I mean, I should admit to it because I feel like I'm a little self-aware of it. There's a hubris that comes with, especially with stand-up, that comes with sort of like, this is the purest form of the art form.
Yeah.
And so when you see someone using props or when you see someone lip syncing, a part of you feels like, I am better than this, but we're not really. And so for me personally, I enjoyed Sarah Cooper's videos, the ones that came across my timeline. I enjoyed them and I watched them. And then when people talk about stuff like Netflix specials, that's stuff that it really is a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Which is what all of entertainment is. So when people get mad at it, I laugh because I'm like, no, the market is reacting to demand.
Right.
So if the demand for those videos is high, which it was, she was getting on all the late night shows and getting a lot of publicity for them, then someone out there is going to be like, how do we monetize this? And I would never in a million years blame Sarah for picking up that gig, because that's what we're all in this business for, to try and make a living. So if you can make a good living, and the truth of the matter is the Netflix special is going to also, it will be a determinant, because at the end of the day, you have to produce results.
Yeah.
So yes, people might get mad at you for getting a Netflix special while you're lip syncing, but guess what? You're going to have to put in the work to get to season 2 or to get the second Netflix special, right? Like the first one might be considered a gimme, but if it's terrible, you're done, right? Like no one comes back around.
Right.
Because that's sort of the tough nature of the business.
Right.
the market will decide. If your Netflix special is terrible, and if it's great, then wonderful. You used this sort of particular skill set, which was your lip syncing to Trump speeches, and you managed to build it into a bigger platform to sort of showcase the rest of either your writing or acting skills. And
Yeah.
for me, I have no fault. Like, for me, it's like, and I get what you're saying, like comedians will jump on it, but yeah, a lot of it is because a lot of those people are sitting at home being like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of something that was catchy and viral that would take me to the next place? Because guess what? 95% of the people who will jump on it and complain about that would switch places with her in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think
Like, if you did like a time travel where we did the Men in Black and you sort of like blanked people's brains so they would forget,
yeah,
95% of those people would go back in time and do lip syncing videos to get that Netflix special.
it's like that Beatles movie with that kid that no one knows who the Beatles are. Yesterday, I think it's called.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're swimming up against this notion of egalitarianism versus talent or something. Like when you're talking about stand up and people thinking it's easy because it's just a person going up. Like all you see as an audience member, maybe an unseasoned audience member, is a human being getting on stage and talking. The same way I think in the 50s and 60s folk music. Oh, it's just a person who figured out 3 chords on a guitar. And but what happens is that evolves, and the talent that if people have talent, then they do something extra special with those simple tools. But there's sort of, and that's what social media kind of does too. Like anyone can join it. Anyone can make an account, but to kind of
anyone can tweet, and that's the thing. So if you have like 6 funny tweets in a year, you might get 10,000 followers from those 6 extremely viral tweets, right?
Yeah,
that doesn't make you a comedian. I mean, it would if you sort of monetized it.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to go up on stage and do 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm never going to hate you for your 6 viral tweets. But at the same time, I'll never assume, because a lot of people will assume like, oh, you had 6 viral tweets, you should be on stage. It's like, it doesn't translate like that. Oh, you had 6 viral tweets, we should give you a sitcom. It's like, no, that's not how it works, right? But it's like, you can't, it might work. It might be that this person with 6 viral tweets is actually a prolific writer, and they might actually write themselves into a very funny book or TV show or movie. But then there's also putting in the work throughout the years, the Mindy Kalings of this world and the Tina Feys of this world and the Issa Raes of this world, who have put in the work throughout their lives, creating content, perfecting sort of their art form, and then sort of playing it into TV shows and movies and stuff like that. And so it's like, there's a balance. There's always a balance. And for me, at the end of the day, I say like, the reason why I say like you have to deliver is because people who create stuff, you can't hide. I mean, the only people who are sort of like immune from this are like the executives, the people who get to make this decision.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? Because they never have to create anything. But for the creators, it's always about what's the product you're going to put in front of people.
Right.
So how you got to that platform, some people might be mad at you about it, but for me, it's, at the end of the day, it's like, what are you going to do with it?
You know, you're clearly a thoughtful fellow. I mean, I know this from your comedy. I know this from this conversation. And when we began, we had invoked, or you had invoked, this notion of introspection during this time of stasis or stillness, whatever you want to call it. I guess I want to go back to that. I wonder, because that's a big thing for so many of us enduring this, you know. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you've had the time to think about the way we used to live, the way you used to live, the way we could be living, you know. Have you had a chance to think about yourself and you know, reflect upon the good stuff, the bad stuff, and maybe when we get to the other end of whatever this is, what you'd want what you'd want to do differently yourself, and maybe what we as a society, as a culture, could be doing differently? Have you thought about that?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of things we could be doing differently as a society, because one thing we've learned in this moment is how capitalism has sort of entrenched itself in our lives to a point whereby we're just doing, like, our lives are just dollar signs now, which is kind of sad as a society that we're doing this to ourselves. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's very interesting because it's like, a lot of people talked about how, like loss of work and loss of income and stuff like that. But like the shipping companies have gone through the roof,
Well, you're making
like their profits.
Absolutely, and you make a good point, because every time I've asked anyone this question or talked about how things are going, I ultimately land on work.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have work or I don't have work, or I've never been busier, or I don't have enough to do. People are talking about their labor as a way
Yes.
of answering this question, which tells
Yeah.
you how that's really problematic. That's how we measure our days and measure our worth, or
That's
measure our condition, like our material conditions. That's how we talk about ourselves. It's that
That's
or the
all that
weather.
matters.
Yeah, it's either that or
Yeah.
the weather. And so what does that mean? Yeah.
So for me, it's been a case of, learning that I think I used work for the longest time also to sort of like, I didn't really pay attention to the to my own life in a way that I have this past, 10 months or 11 months or however long we've been in quarantine. I think a lot of the times I just sort of was on autopilot. You're booking stuff, you're going from one gig to another, and you're not really enriching yourself from any of these experiences.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've sort of made a deal with myself is like moving forward, regardless of how the society deals with this pandemic and how we come out of it. If we ever get back to live performance, I'm going to be more. I want to pay more attention to every show that I do, because I feel like I took a lot for granted.
Yeah.
But also the life around me, because I mean, as you would remember, in the middle of the summer, this awakening was happening after George Floyd was murdered in the States, that the world was sort of having conversations about race and racism and discrimination, but none of it was new to me in terms of the way the world works.
Well, yeah,
But
yeah.
I learned so much about the people around me, my friends, my colleagues, acquaintances. I learned so much about their own sort of like the bubbles some of them had been in, because I'm like, how have you not paid attention to any of this? Because
Yeah.
for me, I assumed, again, because we don't have these conversations often enough, that everyone was on the same page. And so I made a conscious effort to be like, okay, I'm never going to minimize my experiences anymore, because I think part of the conversations we need to have is to sort of learn from people who are not only just different from us, but also who have completely different experiences than we do.
Yeah.
Right? Because I remember, and personally, I related it to the Me Too movement. And when everyone was talking about it, because it started out again in Hollywood and spread across the world, and people were talking about it. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who I guess I was guest hosting on her radio show. And I said, the reckoning that was happening with Harvey Weinstein, with Bill Cosby, I was like, this is great for the entertainment industry, but I wonder what it would do for the other industries.
Right.
Like insurance and agriculture and education and all these other places that mistreatment of women in the workplace is happening as well.
Yeah.
But even as I said it, I didn't know the scope of it. I didn't fully understand the scope of it until in my group of friends and acquaintances and colleagues, I learned about the scope of it, because every woman that I know in any professional setting had a story to tell.
Right.
And I didn't know that. I honestly did not know that. And
Yeah.
it was like one of those moments where I went, oh, I would never have known this if this conversation were not happening, because I don't think I've ever in any sort of setting asked any of my girlfriends or colleagues or, female colleagues or anything like, hey, have you been harassed at work? Like, I've never, it's not a conversation you start to have, but then it's a conversation we should be having.
Absolutely.
And we should be providing that platform for people to be able to be like, hey, something at work is happening that I'm not comfortable with. And so in the same way, I realized that my own experiences with being discriminated against racially I've sort of toned them down, either when I'm retelling the experience or just completely not brought it up for fear of being that guy. And I made a conscious choice to be like, no, no, no. From this moment on, both in the moment when it's happening, I'm going to say something, but also try and broadcast this to as many people involved as I can,
Yeah.
so that it doesn't happen again.
So this mindset has been born. I think you're saying that this mindset or this perspective has been brought on by this pandemic, and I think that's where you're coming from. And I do think that when you talk about, when the George Floyd incident occurred and Black Lives Matter conversations were at the fore, you were learning more about your friends, and we were learning more about what people generally thought about such situations, which a lot of it was like obliviousness. I didn't know. Oh, I really didn't know. And meanwhile, a lot of us were like, what are you talking about? There's an incident like this in Canada, in the US, every day, every single day we hear, if you pay attention, right? So what where I'm coming from, and I think where you're coming from, is in terms of aligning this with the pandemic, is we had time on our hands to pay attention. And a lot of us
There were no distractions.
That's
there
right.
was no NHL hockey. There was no, parade. There was no festival. There was no. You had to sit at home and sort of stew and marinate in this information.
So that to me is the gift of all of this, is that we got time. We got time to ourselves and to pay attention to things that we wouldn't have had time to pay attention to before.
Or just could intentionally avoid, because that's the thing. That's the conversation.
That's true too. Yes.
That people want to avoid. And again, especially when it comes to white supremacy, the conversations about white supremacy are very interesting, because a lot of white people get defensive about them when you bring them up, because they think you're trying to dehumanize them.
Right.
And it's like, no, actually the dehumanizing is coming from your end. And that's the issue, right? Because a lot of white people want to be allies, but I'm like, you can't be an ally if you don't actually believe that this is a problem.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Like, until you actually believe, until white people specifically treat white supremacy like they do rape and pedophilia and murder, we are not going to have this conversation. Right. Because it's like, you look at, for example, like the Trump administration, right? Big supporters of white supremacy. They put it out front. They didn't hide it. They didn't do anything. People within that administration that sort of enabled it. I look at like a Sean Spicer, one of the first few, press secretaries of the 9 that he had in 4 years. Bananas in itself. He gets off, he's like, I'm done with this. He's broken, whatever, like he wants to resign. And then 2 weeks later, he's on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, he was platformed. He was re-platformed. That's correct. Yeah.
Yes, that's telling me that you didn't take this as seriously as you pretend to be. Even the ones who consider themselves allies. People like Jimmy Kimmel, who would sit there and cry about how terrible Trump is, and then have him on his, talk show to have some chit-chat. Some light ribbing.
Did Kimmel have Trump on?
No, he had Sean Spicer on.
Oh, he had Spicer on. Yes, that's right. And he played that basketball game against Ted Cruz, which really bothered me. Yeah.
And so it's like, it's those things where you're like, one side is fully committed to dehumanizing people because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
And so for me, you can't tell me that I have to sit down with that person and have a conversation with them. Because guess what? If someone is anti-immigration, for example, but not in a racial way, they're saying, no, we are going to be anti-immigration to everyone, whether you're coming from England or Italy or Zimbabwe or Japan or Brazil, then I can sit down with that person and we can have a conversation. What are you trying to have a conversation about? But if one person is like, no, black or brown people are just beneath me, then I can sit down with you and have a conversation. Because the starting point is you being committed to my dehumanization. So why should I be a part of your humanization?
Yeah.
And so once we have, I think one of the things that frustrates me is that we continue to have this conversation where people are like, support black businesses and support black artists. And I'm like, this isn't a fad. they shouldn't be like overalls, like they're in for a
Yeah.
few months and then we go back to normal.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it should be this the whole way. And if it's not, if you're not going to, because I remember having a conversation about racist when I would go out on the road, and I would come back, like I told you, I'd come back to the city and I would talk to some of my friends and they would be like, that's the country bumpkin, like it's just that one country bumpkin.
Right.
And all these racist people that keep coming up, no one seems to be related to them. Right. And I'm always like, whose uncle is this? Whose aunt is this? Because these are people that live in your societies and until you're honest about it and stop sort of giving them a pass. Because the other thing that I hear is like, oh, it's just a certain generation.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No, I don't have time for that. Do you understand? Like, I don't have the time to wait for a certain generation to die out for me to be considered a human being.
Yeah.
So until we have those conversations, and that's part where I'm like, the pandemic was great in terms of we marinating that, but it also gave me time to be like, no, we're going to have honest conversations and we're going to have them in a way that is constructive for everyone. We're going to stop hiding behind people's feelings where it's like, I can't say that because it's my uncle, it's my stepdad, it's my mom, and I can't have their feeling. No. They're being horrible human beings if they're being white supremacists.
Yeah. I mean, you've had a lot of, it sounds like, but based on what you're saying, you've had a lot of time and a lot of things to ruminate on. You have been writing for some other outlets. Have you had an opportunity to write comedy for yourself, for stand-up? I know it seems like when or how is that even going to come back? So I can see why the motivation might not be there, but have you had a chance to write jokes?
I have. So here's the thing. So in the summer, people started doing outdoor shows and I was like, I got to get out. I got to get out and do stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, we're all going to be talking about the pandemic, aren't we? And it's like, it was, and I was right, because we went to shows and it was all pandemic related stuff. But it was like, it's great because the thing about comedy is that even though you're all sort of in the same situation, you all come out with very different perspectives on things. So I did write some stand-up. I have been writing some stand-up. It's all pandemic related because that's sort of what has been happening, and I've been in quarantine. And so a lot of it has been about the idea of staying home. I've written some very terrible jokes about streaming services because I have all of them,
Yeah, me too. Like, I suddenly, I've acquired all of them. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to, and then slowly one day I woke up and I was like, oh yeah, I am knee deep in streaming services. And, and so I wrote,
I'll up the ante. I also have, I'm the last person. I have TV cable. I have cable and the streaming services. It's too much stuff.
Now you're just bragging.
I am.
At this point.
I am
now
bragging.
You're just, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Rockefeller, is this what I'm talking to?
Well, you have, normally here's my justification, Arthur. Normally, I need it for the NBA playoffs, I've decided. Like, I just want to be able to watch whatever game. And then U.S. politics was like the NBA playoffs. Like, I kind of wanted to be able to switch from MSNBC to CNN to sometimes CBC News.
And get the full dose.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, too. Once a streaming service comes in with live sports, cable is done. I think that's the only thing they're holding on to.
Yes.
Because all the other stuff has moved. The food networks of this world and HGTV, which is a very popular channel as well. But yeah, so
sorry to distract you with my consumption habits.
No. But it's true. So yeah, I've managed to write some stuff. I don't know how any of it is any good.
Yeah.
I did a few Zoom shows here and there. People seem to like the stuff, but again, you don't get the exact reaction because, like, this medium is very different from standing in front of people on stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote some stuff. And so I'm just sort of like going through this sort of like, because some of it is like also a bit dated now, because I'm like, oh, I wrote this in the 3rd month of quarantine.
Yes.
And we're now, 10 months into quarantine. So maybe that doesn't quite board as well. I remember you asked me if there's something I will not miss. And I will tell you this, as much as I love interacting with people, I will not miss handshakes. I will tell you that right now. Handshakes are done.
Oh,
And I'm so happy.
I'm happy too. I find them awkward and yeah.
Because it's not even about the awkwardness. Because here's the thing: when you do a show, people come up to you after, you're gonna have, a few, tens of people shaking your hand who want to say, either thank you for a good job or I enjoyed it, which is very, I'm grateful for it, and I'm happy that I have nights where people can connect with me to a point where they feel the need to come and shake my hand and say thank you. But not all those handshakes are the same.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
And in this era of contagion, I'm just so happy that is done, because there will be times where you'd shake someone's hand and you'd be like, why is your hand wet?
Weren't we doing that? But I thought we were already pre-pandemic. There was the pound, there was some sort of, fist bumps. I thought we were kind of I was already doing it. I've discovered I'm vaguely a germaphobe and I didn't realize it. I know I'm a hypochondriac.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I've been carrying hand sanitizer for years.
Oh, okay.
But I was hiding it because I felt like society wouldn't accept me if they knew that every after a show, because I would shake people's hands and then I would go into a corner very quietly and put hand sanitizer.
But that's smart.
And so
that's a smart thing that you did.
But here's the thing. I was ashamed of myself until 10 months ago when I realized I was doing the right thing this whole time.
You were ahead of your time.
And I don't get any credit for it because I've been hiding it for years, and only people who were close enough to me to actually see me, either put it in my pocket right after, or, it's just one of those things. I've always had it in either like in my jacket or something. I've always had hand sanitizer because I was like, again, like you would shake someone's hand and you'd be like, that was a little too sticky for my liking. And I don't have, and again, you're talking about like fist bumps. Yes, I was never consistent with being like, I'm not going to shake your hand, because sometimes it's just too late. You're just like, for the sake of politeness, you're like, I'm just going to go through with this.
I had a thing where I'd say, I have a cold. I just, you don't want to, let's just do this. And I would do the arm thing. Yeah. I would lie.
And so now we don't, you see, now you've been saved from any of that. You don't have to do any of that. Okay. So the idea that I don't have to shake anyone's hand for the next 25 years is great. That just gives me so much joy.
Well, congratulations, okay? Arthur. I think you should be a proud pioneer. Let it out. Yeah. Let the world know. I'm sure we'll all know maybe by your next stand-up special, which I hope is coming soon. Hopefully. I'm definitely trying to be one of the first ones out of the gate. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I want to get out early. Yeah.
As soon as we can get to an audience, because it's also been an exciting time of discovery, either self-discovery like we've talked about, societal discovery.
Yes.
Like the idea that as a giant black man, for example, that when I walk into a bank, they insist that I wear a mask. Do you understand? Like, if you had told me that at some point in my life in Canada, a security guard would be like, could you please, for the love of God, put on a goddamn mask before you walk into this bank, I would have been like, what are you trying to, you're setting me up.
Entrapment. Yeah.
Yeah, you're setting me up. But I can walk into a bank without a mask and I'll be arrested.
Yes.
For not having a mask.
Yes, it's the opposite. Yes.
Yeah. Our world is great.
It is good. It will be good. I'm fairly certain of it. If people want to learn more about you, Arthur, where would you like to send them using the tools we have at our disposal in terms of computers and phones?
Arthur Simeon, that's Arthur, ARTHUR SIMEON, on Instagram, on Twitter. My website is arthursimeon.com. I also have a Facebook page that I'm starting to sort of learn how to deal with that content and put stuff out there. Yeah. But that's all the online platforms you can find me on.
And the new album, or the latest album, The Blackest Panther, was out on Comedy Records, yes?
Yes, Comedy Records produced it. It's on iTunes, and it's also, I believe it's on Amazon now as well.
Yeah.
And for those of you who feel cheap, you can stream it on Spotify.
I have it on.
Please download it so I can I can pay my drug dealer.
Just so
I'm
people-
sorry, my bills.
That's the bills, drug deal. That's part of the bills. You can just say the bills, and we
Yeah.
all understand.
That's true.
Just so people recognize, or rather are aware of it. I happen, not just for me, I happen to have this album on vinyl. It is available on vinyl, is what
It
I'm
is
getting
available
at.
on vinyl as well. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So people can actually, and it's hilarious. Yeah, it is so
I
funny.
appreciate you. Thank you so much. So yeah, if you're an old school vinyl collector, or if you just have a record player, please let me know.
Yeah.
I'll get you vinyl.
Yes.
In fact, if anyone is listening to this and they want a vinyl record, artsimeon@gmail.com.
Oh.
I'm gonna give you my email address.
Wow.
Email me and I'll send you a vinyl record.
You sound like someone
You
who
just have to
get rid
you
of
just
some
have
vinyl.
to drop Fish's name. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That would be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
please email Arthur. Just so we can give people a taste of the Blackest Panther, I wondered if we could actually go out on a bit, or perhaps a couple of bits. I don't want to get greedy here, but Arthur, if we could play something for people, what would you suggest?
Oh, I did not know this was going to happen.
You don't remember the names of the bits? Is that part of the problem?
I don't even. Yeah, that's. I think that the biggest problem right now. It's also trying to figure out is should it be language appropriate?
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Or
Yeah,
is there
it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Don't worry about
Is
that.
there a worry that? Okay.
Do you want me to
off the black?
Do you want me to look it up for you?
Yeah, you know what? Which one? No, do you have any recommendations?
Well, I'm a big fan of the whole thing. I like. I'm trying to think of something that would be appropriate to this conversation, and I feel like perhaps Companion Peacock.
I feel like this conversation was a bit more serious than I thought it was going to be.
Was that my fault? Do you feel like we got too heavy?
No, it's definitely mine. I
Okay.
think I felt like I was I didn't want to be too jokey about some of the stuff that's going on. But, I mean, I do enjoy the silly side of all of the things that we're talking about.
I feel like I have a tendency I have a lot of musicians on my show, and I feel like they come across funny, but I have learned through experience. This goes back to what we were talking about, comedians being protective of their craft. I have found that if I, as an interviewer, try to engage a comedian in sort of playful banter, they get a bit defensive. Like I can hear it, like this guy thinks he's funny now. Everyone thinks they're so funny and they want me to be. So I approach comedians with a bit more earnestness than I do a musician. That says something more about me, but it's from years of experience. I'm like, I can
see that.
Yeah.
I definitely understand where you're coming
Yeah,
from because
so-
it would feel it's like doing morning radio. It's
Yes.
it's like one of those things when you show up to do morning radio and everyone's like so perky and everyone's like, oh my goodness, it's an amazing morning, and you're like, I just woke up, like I can't.
Well, and I will also say,
can't be at that wavelength.
to your points, to the points you made earlier, I respect comedians more than I respect almost any other artist, because to the points we've raised, it's a person, it's their mind, it's their piece of paper and a pencil or a typewriter or whatever they use to get their ideas across and down. That is magical to me. When it's done well, that is the high. There's no acting, I mean, there's performance,
Right.
but it's not like an actor learning someone else's lines. It's not like a singer learning, saying someone else's lyrics. This is pretty a magical craft. So I take it seriously. I'm getting up. I'm on a high horse right now. I'm ranting a little bit. I didn't intend for this to happen, but I just want you to know that I like you, Arthur. I think you're very funny, and to add some levity to this very serious conversation, we should go out on some comedy. And so I don't know. I like Three Sisters. I'm just trying to think.
Three Sisters.
Three Sisters is
So,
good. Companion Peacock
Three
would be
Sisters is
appropriate.
good. Companion Peacock would be great if you want to talk about privilege. Three Sisters is a fun story because it's obviously from my life, or Black James Bond, because there's gonna be some
Something's
race-related
happening.
James Bond
Yes.
content soon. So any of those three would work for this situation.
Well, as we're speaking, I believe the forthcoming James Bond film has been delayed again because of the pandemic, and I don't know if they're shooting more scenes or what's going on. It seems like a big mystery, but why don't we go out on that? We'll go out on.
Sure.
Let's go out on Black James Bond. This is from the beautiful and funny album. It's not beautiful. It is beautiful. I'm going to say it's beautiful. I've never said a comedy record was
the
beautiful.
artwork was amazing.
It is beautiful artwork, yes. And it looks
Yeah.
great on vinyl. If I might say, if you have the full-size version of the Blackest Panther, You should get it. This is Black James Bond by Arthur Simeon. Arthur, this was so wonderful to have you on the show, and I appreciate your time and your talent. Thank you for this, and best of luck with everything in the future.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
No, but here's the thing. I would like to live in a world where we're all equal. I'll speak up on these issues because I get to have a microphone, I get to meet people and have a platform, and that's cool. But here's the thing. I'll fight for equality, but I won't fight for similarity. And sometimes when you're marginalized, we confuse the two things as being the same, and they're not the same. I would like to live in a world where everyone, regardless of the color of your skin, had opportunities in healthcare and education and in the workplace. But here's the thing. I won't fight for similarity. And I'll give you an example. There's been a campaign on social media for the next James Bond to be played by a black actor. They want the next James Bond to be a black actor to show like diversity and progress in the world, and everyone is so excited because Idris Elba was in the on the forefront. Big beautiful black man, kind of like myself. That wasn't the joke, but thank you. Was in the running to be the next James Bond, and people were like, "Oh, he would make an amazing James Bond." And yeah, big black guy. I'm like, no, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Here's the thing: James Bond cannot be played by a black actor. Okay, it will be the shortest Bond movie in the history, and not because black people die first, you racist human being. I will explain something everyone is seem to forget. James Bond is a super spy, but a super spy who operates in the real world. And in the real world, any room you walk into as a giant black man, you're immediately the most suspicious person in that room. You can't be a spy if your cover can't even last for more than 10 seconds, okay? You walk into any room and say, who is the big black guy? Even a room full of black people, a giant black guy walks in, who the fuck is a big nigga that just walked in? We don't even have good disguises. White people can put fake blonde hair and green contacts, different person entirely. You see a giant black guy with contacts and blonde hair, that's the spy. Shoot him in the face, don't even. No, I want my spies to remain white people because you're accepted everywhere. You're like MasterCard.
Thank you very much for listening all the way to the end of this episode, and thanks again to Arthur Simeon for appearing on this, the 596th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available wherever you get your podcasts. If you can't find an episode you've heard about and you're looking for it and you don't know where it could be, or if you want to learn more about me and sign up for my monthly newsletter, please visit vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook. You can follow the show on Twitter at Vish Creative, or you can follow me directly on Twitter and on Instagram at Vishkhanna. Also visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. $6 or more grants you access to exclusive audio and video content, and if you're interested in receiving a Creative Control t-shirt, please send me a message on Patreon and I'll get you one while supplies of different sizes last. Thanks again to live@masseyhall.com, where you can watch beautifully captured concerts by great Canadian artists, and also to Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, fine establishments in Guelph, Ontario, where I used to live, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton, where I never lived, but I pondered living there. There was a time where Hamilton was like, yeah, that might be all right, but we didn't do it. We stayed in Guelph. We were Guelph people. Even in Edmonton, I feel like a Guelph person. You know what I mean? Anyway, I want to thank all of those people for their in-kind support for this show. Thanks, too, to Jim Guthrie for letting me use music of his on the show, and you can learn more about Jim and his work. He seems busier than ever, and he's doing all sorts of stuff. He's on TikTok, and he's harmonizing with people. He's doing with all the TikTok things. He's really up on... Jim's just like, he's like old, but he's like really into like being not old and like keeping track of stuff. And you'll see what I mean when you go to jimguthrie.org. He's not that old. He's just a little bit older than me. And I'm not old. I'm young. Super, super young. Finally, thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode and subscribing to this podcast, Creative Control. Maybe asking your friends to listen to it and decide if they might want to subscribe to the podcast. That's always a good way to get people to keep up with the show is if they subscribe to it. Even when they subscribe to it, they're like, I don't even like this, but it's still coming in. I guess I should listen to it. It's on my thing. And then they listen to it and they're like, I like it. I'm glad I subscribed. Anyway, that would be awesome. Tell your friends to subscribe to Creative Control and spread the word about the show. That's it. That's all I can ask. Even that seemed like too much. You listened this far. That's good. But still, a little bit more effort on your part would really help me. I'm going to say nothing else except for bye for now. Thank you very much. You're great. Bye for now.